The film begins at night with a view of Los Angeles. A person is cutting fence wire when a security guard arrives. This man named Louis Bloom talks briefly with the guard before unexpectedly attacking him, stealing his watch and driving away. Louis then takes the wire and other metal items to a scrap metal yard to sell. Despite his attempt to get a job there, the foreman refuses, stating he doesn't hire thieves. While driving on a freeway, Louis witnesses a car crash with 2 policemen and a woman trapped inside. A news team led by Joe and Marcus arrives and rushes to film the accident. Louis, intrigued, asks Joe if they need any help, but Joe declines and instructs Marcus to go to another emergency. The next morning, Louis is at his apartment watching TV and flipping through news channels until he finds coverage of the car crash he witnessed the night before. Determined to get involved in this kind of work, Louis steals a racing bicycle and exchanges it for a camcorder and a police radio scanner at a pawn shop. It's nighttime and Louis is parked in his car, tuning into police dispatcher calls. He heads to the scene of one of the calls and begins filming. However, the police order him to leave. The same response is repeated at each scene he tries to film. At a shooting scene where another news cameraman is already filming, Louis is again told to step back by the police. Undeterred, Louis takes his footage to a local news station, KWLA, where he shows it to the news editor, Nina, and her assistant, Frank. Nina pays him $250 for his footage, signaling the beginning of opportunities for him. The next morning, Louis watches the news report featuring his footage and takes note of the police call codes to study them. Later, he sits in a fast food restaurant where he's joined by a young man named Rick. After a brief chat, Louis hires him as an assistant. That night, they head out together with Rick navigating while Louis drives recklessly, making Rick quite nervous. Despite their efforts, they always seem to arrive at crime scenes too late. However, at one shooting scene, Louis sneaks into the house through another entrance and captures footage from inside. Impressed with his work, Nina at KWLA continues to be supportive. Louis and Rick persist night after night, chasing police calls and documenting scenes. They're seen getting gas for Louis' new car before arriving in a crash scene. Here, Louis goes as far as repositioning a victim's body he had better shot. As the police and other news crews arrive, Louis walks away. The next morning, Louis stands beside Nina in the TV studio as they prepare for the morning news. He asks her out for dinner, and though she initially declines, she seems unsure. Outside the studio, Joe waits for Louis and offers him a job controlling his second news film van. Despite Joe's attempts to convince him, Louis declines and Joe walks away visibly angry. Later, Louis and Nina are seen sitting in a Mexican restaurant together. Louis compliments Nina on her appearance, and after some intense conversation, he expresses his desire for a romantic relationship with her. The outcome of their conversation remains unknown. The following night, Louis and Rick are driving to a hit-and-run accident when they hear a report on the radio about a small plane crash. They rush to the scene but arrive too late as Joe has already filmed it. Louis goes to KWLA to see Nina, but she's upset because he didn't capture the plane crash footage and he doesn't have much else to offer. In Jake's apartment, the news report featuring Joe's video is playing on the TV while Jake is in the bathroom, yelling at his reflection. He then hits the cabinet, breaking the mirror. The next morning, Louis is found underneath Joe's news van, working on it quietly. He slides out and walks away unnoticed. That night, they're en route to the scene of a one-vehicle accident, which happens to involve Joe's van crashing head-on into a power pole. As the ambulance crew tends to Joe, Louis films the entire scene with Joe giving him a peculiar look. While driving, they receive a call on the police scanner about a home invasion. They rush to the scene and arrive before the police. Louis jumps out with his camcorder and approaches the house. Hearing gunshots from inside, he hides in the bushes and captures footage of 2 men fleeing in a black SUV. Once they're gone, Louis films a shotgun outside the house before entering. He discovers a woman dead on the sofa and follows a trail of blood upstairs to find another woman's body. He then rushes back downstairs and finds a man coughing and lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. He rushes to the front door and finds Rick looking for him. Together, they sprint back to their car as the sound of police sirens grows closer. They drive off just as a police car approaches. Back in town, Louis stops the car and instructs Rick to stay put while he edits the footage at the rear of the car, removing any trace of the 2 men or their SUV. Confidently, Louis walks into KWLA and informs Nina about the video he just filmed. Nina and her team watch the footage in shock. Along with Nina, Louis negotiates a price for the footage, emphasizing that if he doesn't get what he wants, he'll take it to another news station willing to pay more. He insists on meeting the station's staff to assert his role as the owner and president of his new company, Video Production News. Louis also hints at personal demands he expects Nina to fulfill during their next private encounter. Nina then introduces Louis to all the KWLA staff. Shortly after, they're in the production room as the story is about to be aired. The news show begins, displaying the graphic images that Lewis filmed. The next morning, Lewis watches various TV stations reporting on the same story from the previous night when there's a knock at the door. Detective Frontieri and Detective Lieberman enter the apartment and question Lewis about the triple murder he filmed. Lewis tells them that he saw two men driving off in an SUV as he'd arrived, but he doesn't disclose that he captured good footage of the men in their SUV. Detective Frontieri suspects Lewis is withholding information, but he claims he entered the house to offer assistance. He hands them a copy of the edited video, and they leave. Now Lewis takes matters into his own hands. He watches the unedited version of the video to get a better look at the two men. He zooms in and retrieves the license plate number of the SUV, then conducts an online search to find the owner's address. Early that evening, Lewis picks up Rick and informs him that he knows the address of the SUV owner. He plans to go to that address to follow the SUV and find a good location for filming. Rick is visibly nervous and suggests calling the police, but Lewis has a different plan. He stops the car and promotes Rick to Executive Vice President of Video Production News, giving him a raise. They arrive at the address and park nearby to wait and observe. Lewis reveals to Rick that there's a $50,000 reward for information. After waiting, one of the men exits the house and drives off, with Lewis and Rick following behind. The man picks up his friend, and after stopping for gas, they head to a fast food restaurant to eat. Lewis and Rick park across the road, and Lewis makes a call to report his suspicion that he's found the two men responsible for the triple murder. After the call, he turns on the police scanner to monitor the situation. Lewis instructs Rick to film from further down the street, and though Rick objects, he reluctantly agrees when Lewis threatens him. As they start filming, a police car arrives and two officers enter the restaurant to order food. Lewis notices one of the men holding a gun under the table. Just then, another police car arrives, and as the officers enter the restaurant, the two men open fire. One officer is shot and the two men are wounded, but one manages to escape in the SUV. A police car gives chase, with Lewis following closely. At the next intersection, the police car is struck. Despite this, Lewis continues to follow the SUV. Another police car intercepts the SUV, causing it to ram into a pole and flip onto its side. Lewis abruptly stops his car and jumps out. To begin filming, Lewis instructs Rick to approach the SUV and film the supposedly dead man inside. However, as Rick approaches, the man inside is still alive and shoots Rick 4 times, mortally wounding him. Rick falls to the ground, and the man kicks out the windshield, standing and facing Lewis, who continues to film. As the man walks away, another police car arrives and shoots him dead. More police cars arrive, and Lewis walks over to Rick, still filming as Rick lies dying. Rick asks Lewis why he didn't warn him when he knew the man was alive. Calmly, Lewis responds that he didn't want to miss capturing valuable footage. It's a ruthless decision. Lewis takes Rick's video camera and leaves. At Kegavale, Lewis shows Nina the video footage of the crime scene, but it's edited before Rick speaks. As they're about to air the story, Frontieri and Lieberman arrive, requesting the unedited video footage. Nina asserts that it's Kegavale's property and will be aired on the news show. Frank pulls Nina aside and informs her that they receive information from someone named Joel, who was informed by someone in the police task force that over 50 pounds of cocaine were found hidden at the murder scene. It turns out to be a drug robbery. Nina decides to delay reporting this and stick to the original story of a home invasion for the time being. At the police station, we see Frontieri interviewing Lewis about the facts of his previous police report. He concocts a story about being followed by the two men in the SUV and calling the police upon seeing them enter the restaurant. Frontieri senses he's lying but can't prove it. She's disgusted by his actions, especially filming his partner dying. She walks out of the interview room, leaving him alone. Lewis calmly walks away from the police station. In a final scene, he's seen talking to his 3 new employees beside his 2 new video production news vans. He gives them a pep talk before they climb into their vans and drive off into the night, ending the movie. Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on your notifications.